Yes, and it's free too. That's the good part. I mean, there's a paid version, but the free one is what I'm using in this version pretty well. So. 5 seconds. Check 1 2 test. My mic is live. Hey everybody, Dragon Movie Guy here. June movies are the height of summer movie season, and I am really excited for June movies for 2024. It is the height of let me try that one more time. Thank you, everybody, for joining me today. June movies are the height of summer movie season, and summer movie season is my favorite season of the entire movie-going year. And let's talk about the good, the bad, and the of June movies 2024. This is a new format for the channel, so we're going to try it out. And with me trying it out today is a first-time guest to the channel. He is, well, before I introduce my guest, let me introduce myself. My name is Brian. My title is Dragon Movie Guy, and this is the Dragon Movie Guy podcast. All right, that part out of the way. My guest today is a YouTuber. He's got over 2,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel. He does Out of the Theater movie reactions. He does live streams pretty much, I think, every week. And he's young, he's Canadian, and he's really insightful, and I like all three of those combinations in a guest. So please welcome to the channel for the very first time, Zach Milne of Zach Milne Talks Movies. Zach, thanks for coming on Dragon Movie Guy.
Thank you so much, man. I'm honored, and I'm glad to be here.
I really appreciate you coming on, and we're going to start off with a segment that I like to call, as I switch that out and go, boom, oh. Sorry, technical difficulties. No, not that one. There we go. Oh. Sorry. Oh, there we go.
We're live.
That's getting to know you. Yeah, we're live.
That's the fun of being live.
Yeah, exactly. So Zach Milne, tell me a little bit about yourself. You're Canadian. You're in your 20s. Tell me about how you became a movie fan. How long have you been a movie fan?
All my life, really. I mean, 25. Growing up in Canada, British Columbia, and I've just always loved movies. I mean, as far back as I can remember, I just loved them. The first movies I ever saw was Free Willy and Star Wars: A New Hope, which was just Star Wars when I watched it. But yeah, those movies were the first ones I ever watched. And I just, for as long as I can remember, I've just always been fascinated in movies and TV and just watching stories and characters play out and watching their lives. And yeah, I just, I can't think of a time where I didn't want to put something on TV. That's never existed for me. I've always had to have something on.
Now that's an interesting thing. Free Willy kind of takes place. I'm originally from Seattle. You're from the British Columbia area. Yep. That film takes place with killer whales, orcas, in the general vicinity. Was that part of what kind of grabbed you into being a movie fan?
That's a good question, actually, because the orca whale is my favorite animal now because of that movie, and I love them and ever since. But I don't think there's a correlation between the orca and my love of movies. I think it was just a really entertaining movie when I was a kid. I think I just really liked it, and I'm sure the colors of the orca and the water and all that stuff really stimulated my young mind too when I was younger watching Free Willy. But Star Wars was the one where I more so give that credit for my love of movies, because that was more like adventure and fantasy and really getting sucked into a whole different world than the one that we inhabit.
And great segue. So what is it about Star Wars and adventure movies that appeals to you?
I think it's just the escapism for sure. I love what one of the things I love the most about movies is they come from one person's mind, but it takes thousands of people to put it together. And I've always thought that that was really cool. Even as a young kid, when I was watching TV and watching movies, I always had that in my mind where it was like someone had this in their head and they just were able to get it out of their head for everyone to see. And that was something really fascinating to me, especially as a young kid. I was always thinking up stories and thinking up I was a very imaginative kid when I was younger. So the fact that it was like the ability to get someone's thoughts out into the world was always just so cool. And I always loved the idea of the collaborative effort that it is to put a movie together. I think that's such a cool thing just for humanity. Something that brings us all together is putting a movie together.
Yeah, when you think about it, the thousands of people and the hundreds of millions of dollars that it takes to put out a movie like Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing that it gets done and can actually make money, and that it can be good.
Yeah,
it still amazes me to this day. Like, because when I come out of a movie that's a big blockbuster and I go, it doesn't surprise me that the ball gets dropped somewhere. But then when I see a masterpiece, big budget movie like that, and you go like, my God, how were they able to keep the directorial focus and make it coherent and amazing? Yeah,
exactly.
I love. It's one of the things. It is the most collaborative form of art that we have to this point, other than maybe video games, because those video games can cost $1 billion to put out. Absolutely. That's interactive. So, but yeah, I love. Tell me what made you want to start your YouTube channel?
Yeah, YouTube definitely came out of a time where I was just searching for something to let my creative outlet free in a way, because I was a big movie talker in middle school. I think around when I was like 10 years old is when I discovered Jeremy Jahns on YouTube for the first time. And my family, movies were always, and TV was always like, when you have dinner, you sit down, you watch TV, you watch a movie, or Sunday after church, you come home and my grandparents would come over and we'd all watch a movie. And movies were always such a big part of my family. But no one wanted to talk about them the way I wanted to talk about them. I always had more to say than just it was good or I liked it. I always wanted to talk more about the elements of it. And I didn't really have that around with family or with friends at the time. So I found Jeremy Jahns on YouTube one day, and then I just went down the rabbit hole of Jeremy Jahns, Chris Stuckman, The Schmoes Know, John Flickinger, Collider Movie Talk, all those guys, Nostalgia Critic, just the greats, the classic, the originators of what we do on YouTube, really. And that really started to shape and form my movie talking mind, because they were breaking down elements of the movie the way I wanted to, but couldn't articulate. And they kind of helped me to find that voice and find ways to articulate what I was feeling, what I wanted to discuss, to the point that in middle school, I just became this like movie talking fanatic, to the point that I even had a friend say to me once, because I got this group of friends together who loved watching movies and loved talking about movies with me. But I had one of my friends tell me, like, we liked hanging out with you, but we had to learn how to talk like you. Like, we didn't talk like this before we hung out with you, but we liked talking and hanging out with you, that we needed to learn. So I had this great group of friends in middle school and high school where I could talk about movies and go to movies with, and we were watching Jeremy Jahns, we were watching all the movie stuff on YouTube together. And then those friends moved after I graduated high school, like a little bit after we graduated. So I was just kind of in a place where I needed to talk movies, but I didn't have people, once again, to do that with. And I was a drama student in high school. I did some performing stuff. So my fear of like public speaking and my fear of like talking in front of people wasn't real. It was a thing when I was younger, but after like I got into drama in middle school and high school, it kind of vanished for me. And YouTube had always been in the back of my mind. And I had many people in my life tell me, you should do YouTube. You need to start a YouTube channel. Because I would post reviews on Facebook just for friends and family. And they would tell me, like, we want to hear more, like, do YouTube. And I was just petrified to do YouTube. And then when those friends were gone, I was like, I think YouTube is all I've got left. I think I just got to do it. So I did it. And one of the best decisions I ever made.
That's both depressing and aspirational at the same time. I also love that I also love that you were able to turn movie talking into an expletive. It blew my movie talking mind. I think it's close to how you said it. I don't know. I probably butchered it in there. There was a punchline in there somewhere, but So tell me a little bit about your channel. What can people expect when they tune in to your channel?
Yeah, my channel is very much just a place where I want people like me who want to talk about movies to come and talk about movies. So we do movie reviews. I do movie reviews. I try to do one every weekend. Sometimes I miss one because I'm human. But the big one is Zach Milne Talks Live on Wednesdays. This is something I started about 2 years ago. And it's because I love talking about movie news and I love breaking down the entertainment business and just talk about movies with people. But I wanted to do it in a more casual way as well. So the show is very much talking about movie news, but it's not so much like a news show. I wouldn't say it's a news show. It's very much a hangout space for people who want to talk movies like I do and movie news like I do, where I kind of give the information of what's going on, but then we all break it down together. That's kind of the idea of the show, and that's what it's kind of been for 2 years now. And it's been great. Yeah, I try to do it every Wednesday. Sometimes I miss a Wednesday here and there, but I feel I've been pretty consistent, actually. We're going to be doing episode 85 on this coming Wednesday. So we've been thriving, we've been striving. It's been great.
And I love your interaction you have with your audience there too, because you go through one of the things about your live streams that I think is special and good is that you interact with your audience and you read pretty much every comment,
I try.
everything from the chat, every single one that I can tell, at least in there. And what inspired you to take audience interaction to that level?
I don't know if there was anything that like really inspired. I mean, my show is I never hide it. My show is very inspired by the John Campea show. Like it's basically me being like, I want to be on the John Campea show, but I will never be on the John Campea show. So I'm just going to make my own John Campea show. That's basically what the show, what the show is. I don't hide it because there's nothing wrong with that. And I also like, some people have been like, hey, you're just a John Campea ripoff. It's like, I've never claimed not to be. I've always just done John Campea's version. But I think for me the big thing is it's never lost on me, and I always understand that when people are on the live stream or on in the chat, it's supporting the channel and it's helping us, like, the channel out. They're also giving their time. They could be doing anything else. They don't have to be there talking with me. They don't have to be there watching the show. They don't have to be there at all. They choose to be there. And, that's never something that I take for granted. It's never something I want to take for granted. So if someone's in there and they're engaging and they're participating, I want to make sure that they feel seen and they feel heard because they're giving me their time to be there. And their precious time is something they'll never get back. So I want to make sure that I can make it worth it as much as I can. If they want to have a conversation with me, I'm going to give it to them, is kind of how my mindset is with the show.
What do you have coming up on Zach Milne Talks movies?
Well, I've been looking at some of the news stories that have been coming out. I mean, we got a new Lord of the Rings coming in 2026. I'll probably break that down a little bit. What else is Apes? I'll probably be covering the box office for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes to see how that did, because that's going to be a big story going around. And just as stories come out, that's what we'll be talking about.
Sweet. Zach Milne, thank you for letting me get to know you.
Well, thank you for wanting to get to know me. This was great.
I'm still trying to think of a better out for the segment. But, Yay, there we go. Okay. Technical. Button pushing. So this is the very first time we're trying this particular experiment of the good, the bad, and the meh with movies for each month. So basically my idea was just to say, okay, what can we do where we talk about the big movies each month that are coming out and talk about the good, what we think is the good, what we think is the bad, and I really just don't give a movie-loving caring about this, right? the meh for it all. So my thinking is, okay, we're going to talk over 5, 6, 7 different movies, different projects, including a Star Wars project at the very end. And we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the meh, and do it all in 5 to 10 minutes. That's the plan, at least. And so shall we get started?
All right, let's do it.
Alrighty. Our first movie up is Bad Boys 4. Bad Boys Ride or Die comes out June 7th. This is the 4th Bad Boys film. It brings back Martin Lawrence. It brings back post-slap Will Smith. It even brings back Joey Pants in. I have no idea whether he's going to be alive or dead or how big a role he's going to have, but Joe Pantoliano's coming back, and of course, I think the girl that I think a lot of people have a crush on, Vanessa Hudgens, in some way, shape, or form. So this one looks good-ish. That's why I'm including on the list. But Bad Boys 3 was not good. It was pretty freaking awful in my estimation. But tell me, what do you think? What do you think about the premise for Bad Boys Ride or Die? What do you think about the premise for this film? The idea being that in the premise for this film is largely stealing something from The Watchmen, where actually no, I take it back. It was one of the other things. The premise for this film. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence get set up. They get framed, and then they're on the run. What do you think about the setup for this film? Is this good, bad, or eh?
I mean, I'm not the biggest Bad Boys fan to begin with. I like the first one. I don't really care for the second one. I thought the third one was all right, but disposable. I kind of feel the same way about this one. Disposable. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that this is a franchise that has much legs, personally. I don't think it's talked about very much either anymore nowadays. And I think that the premise for this, it sounds generic. It sounds like a movie I've seen many times, just with Will Smith and Martin Lawrence in there doing their banter that they do in the Bad Boys movies. That I'm sure it'll be entertaining enough, but I don't see myself walking out of Bad Boys Ride or Die and thinking about it the next day. If that makes sense. I think it'll be entertaining in the moment, and then I probably won't go back to it very often. But who knows? Maybe it'll end up being the best of the franchise, and maybe it'll reinvent the action genre.
So let's talk about the good things that we see about this, about what we know about the cast, about the setup, about the premise. What's good about Bad Boys Ride or Die?
I liked the addition of Vanessa Hudgens in Bad Boys for Life. So the fact that they're bringing her back, I think that's good for the movie. Obviously, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence are great in these roles. They're great together. So I think that they're going to be a positive of the movie too. And I believe they have the directors coming back from For Life as well. I think it's the same ones, if I'm remembering correctly. So I thought they did a good job with the third film, and I'm sure they'll do a good job here as well. I just think it is in some ways a little late. I mean, when was For Life? For Life was like 2016.
It was 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah,
it wasn't that long ago. It was.
Oh wow, it feels so much longer than that.
Yeah,
it does. That's the pandemic.
It does. Yeah, it wasn't all that long ago. It was just a couple years ago, and I remember going into that film, and when the Simpson Bruckheimer banner came up at the beginning of the film, because Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer used to be super producers in Hollywood. They used to make all of the really cool action Michael Bay films back in the 80s and 90s. And then Don Simpson passed away, and so Jerry Bruckheimer went off on his own and started making even more outlandish, huge action films. But when Bad Boys 3 hit theaters, I'd completely forgotten that was a Simpson Bruckheimer production. And so when the banner came up at the beginning of the film, I was just like, wow, I haven't seen that in theaters in 20 years. And that really, that made me go, aw. But it also made me go, okay, good. We're getting back to the 90s. We're getting back to classic Will Smith. We're giving Martin Lawrence a starring role and some well-deserved cash. And then the rest of the movie happened. And it's funny because for me, one of the bad things about this is that they're bringing back the director from Bad Boys for Life. I like the idea of the director, and he's done some great stuff. It's actually a directing team this time out. And right. I like the idea of what they did in Bad Boys for Life. I just, the execution I didn't like, and I think you were kind when you said it was disposable. So I don't want to dunk on a bad film. I want to focus on this film. I think you're right. It feels kind of, and talking a little bit about the bad, it feels like the premise that we've seen before. I kind of feel like after watching the trailer for this film that I've already seen the film. Right. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but there's nothing in there that makes me think I have to go watch this in theaters. I mean, I like Bad Boys 1 and 2, 1 more than 2, although I did love Tia Leone in Bad Boys 2. I love buddy cop comedies, but there's something about this that does have a little bit of energy, and it is kind of and it leads me into the meh category, I think, a little bit.
Yeah.
I think the thing that is the meh for me is the fact that Will Smith and Martin Lawrence's characters, at least on the surface, don't seem like they've changed much in 30 years.
That's a good point. Their shtick. Is their shtick getting old kind of thing? And
not that you have to, not that you have to grow up, not that you have to age, not that you have to mature and all that kind of stuff, but it feels, I mean, they both look great for their age.
Yeah.
But it just kind of feels like they were doing this 30 years ago, and there's nothing wrong with that. To a certain extent, I think Ryan Reynolds has been doing the same thing for 25 years, and I still love that. But when you look at the fact that they're both police detectives, and at least one of them has a family and children and adult children, would they really be running around talking exactly like they were when they were 25?
Exactly. Yeah.
I just, so that part of it, I think, has a little bit of the factor for me. I don't know. How about you? Does it kind of ring true, or does that have not sort of the appeal? Is that sort of the for you?
No, I think you're right. I think I very much lean to meh on this one. I think an added thing for this too is, especially with the theater, where the theaters are at right now with audiences and trying to get them in the doors. This isn't really a movie that is, I think, appealing to the general audience. I mean, I believe in June as well, we're going to have Beverly Hills Cop 4 on Netflix coming out, which, I mean, if people can just sit at home and watch Beverly Hills 4, and then this one is in theaters. This I am an advocate for the theaters. I want movies to go to the theaters. I totally want that. But when I think of this kind of movie, I'm like, why am I not watching this on Amazon Prime? Because they've kind of conditioned us in that way. I mean, Roadhouse went to Amazon Prime just this past year, and there's no shortages of movies like this. And I think people who are hardcore movie goers, we'll go see this in theaters for sure. But I don't really see my dad going to see this, which is he's if Avatar's coming out, I'm going to go see Avatar. But Bad Boys, and it's going to be somewhere in a couple weeks, 2 months, it'll be on streaming. I think many people will just decide to wait. And I just don't really feel hype or any kind of excitement for this one. Online, on Twitter, no one's really talking about it. I even forgot it was really coming out next month, to be honest. So I'm meh on this. I'll probably end up seeing it, and I'm sure it'll be entertaining, but I don't think it's going to be anything special.
So do you use your dad as a litmus test for movies like this as to whether or not you're going to go see it, or judging excitement?
No, I'll definitely go and see it. I'll pretty much go see almost anything. I just love going to the theater. I'm one of those people, right? That like it. This is you don't have to worry about getting me in there. But my dad kind of more so represents the more general audience in my mind because, well, I grew up. My dad was the one who took me to theaters. My dad is the one who got me to love the movie theater, and like we would go all the time, and now with streaming and everything, and same with my grandparents. My grandparents would take me to theaters all the time, but like even they're tricky to get into the theater doors nowadays. So like these people who kind of growing up, they were my relatable movie going lovers, and their age has to do with it too. But like now it's harder for them to get them into the movie theater unless it's something they really want to see. So that's kind of how I use them as a test for. And yeah, I look at Twitter and I look at the online social media to see what are people talking about, what's the excitement levels at, and I haven't seen anything for Bad Boys or Ride or Die.
So you've already said you're going to go see this movie, but is this movie a good, a bad, or a eh?
This movie is work. I'm gonna do it just for the channel mostly. But yeah, it's meh. This movie's meh.
Yeah, for me too. It is sadly a meh. I love Simpson Bruckheimer as a production team. I used to like Will Smith, and then slack. And then Martin Lawrence. I like Martin Lawrence. I loved his films in the 90s. I liked his sitcom. But yeah, I don't know. There's just something missing or off about this to where I'm just sort of
Doesn't it feel kind of tired? Like kind of going back to what you were saying with like, they were 25 and it was kind of like it had the energy and it was fun, but now they're like in their like late 50s and they're still running around and doing this, and like doesn't something about it just feel kind of tired?
Well, and it's, the funny thing is it's not the premise per se, because I think you can do that and make it convincing and make it fun.
Mission Impossible's done it in almost every single one of their movies.
Yeah. So it's nothing about the premise per se. It's just when I see the trailers, it just feels like they're going through the motions, and it's kind of, I've seen it all before.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't feel like there's anything fun or new in the trailers that's going to grab me, it's going to say, you have to come see this in theaters, watch it opening night, opening weekend. There's just that it factor is kind of missing for me. It doesn't look bad. It just kind of sort of looks
Yeah.
Which was actually part of the inspiration for doing this entire video. So if it does turn out to be then that could be if this video series is successful, then I will owe Bad Boys 4 for inspiring this on my channel. Ding! I need sound effects. Let's move on to the next film we're talking about. We are talking about this is a movie that comes out well, I should have video there. Apparently I don't at the moment, so it is where it is. No, that's not working either. Alright, well, we had video for one. Hopefully we'll have it again for another one. Well, let's... Oh, no, actually, that will work. Boom.
Perfect.
Yay! Alright, so I just have to hit the Okay. Our second movie that we're talking about for this month is The Watchers. It's starring Dakota Fanning. It is directed by Ishana Shyamalan. This is M. Night Shyamalan's daughter. She's 22 years old, and this is her first directorial feature film debut, and she was able to launch a Dakota Fanning huge budget film launching in the middle of summer movie season. have you seen the trailers for The Watchers? And
I'm trying to remember. I think I might have seen an ad before a YouTube video once. It's not one that's been like heavily on my radar, but I've like been hearing about it for sure. But I don't think I've seen a trailer for it. At least not like paying attention wise.
And the first couple trailers were just the idea is that they get Dakota Fanning and a couple of random strangers get kidnapped, and they get put into this big box, and they are made to entertain some aliens or creatures or something of some kind, and they communicate back and forth through some amber-colored mirrors or lights or, for whatever reason, some standard definition televisions.
I have seen. Okay, yeah, this is kind of starting to ring a bell.
Yeah, and then the latest trailer shows Dakota Fanning basically getting kidnapped by these otherworldly creatures, and she's on vacation or she's on a trip into Ireland, and she goes off in the middle of nowhere, and her technology stops working, and then she kind of gets kidnapped, captured of some kind. The lighting and the cinematography in this looks amazing. The supporting cast, I really haven't seen much from this supporting cast before. There is, I have a cast list here. Olwen Fueri, I'm pretty sure I'm mispronouncing her name, is the older lady in the trailers. Georgina Campbell's in this film. A bunch of people I've never heard of before. Most of them are European, and but it looks pretty well cast. The cinematography looks amazing. I am excited to see the directorial debut from Ishana Shyamalan, and I love Dakota Fanning. And it's weird to think that she's now 30 years old.
Yeah, that's weird.
And she's been a star for 75% of her life.
Yeah.
So the fact that Dakota Fanning chose to be in this film, she didn't have to do M. Night Shyamalan a solid like that, but the fact that she chose this to be a film that she would be in, is a good sign for me. So that and the cinematography are part of the good for me. Any good things stand out for you about The Watchers?
Yeah, I mean, Dakota Fanning sure is a standout. Which, fun fact, the first time I ever saw her was in the Cat in the Hat movie, which my Nana still insists is the worst movie she ever had to sit through with me.
The singular worst film.
Yep. She used to take us to movies all the time, and she took us to my sister and I. She took us to Cat in the Hat, and she still says that is the worst movie that she ever had to take us to, was the Cat in the Hat, which is just funny. Yeah, no, this one's really interesting to me because M. Night Shyamalan, love him, hate him. He's a legendary director because just the imprint he leaves when he makes a film, whether you like it, whether you don't, he always has something interesting to say and always something interesting to bring to the table. So this is his daughter doing this movie. This is her directorial debut. Some of like what you were saying kind of reminds me of like, oh, that feels like it's pulled from Split. That feels like it's pulled from Signs. That feels like it's pulled from The Village. Like it's kind of interesting. It's like I can kind of feel like I can see the inspirations from her father in the story, and I'm sure she probably got advice and help and notes from M. Night Shyamalan as well, which is going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I don't expect it to be a huge hit. I think that Shyamalan's name, even though it's a lineage attachment, it's still an attachment, and I just feel like the Shyamalan name just kind of brings that kind of division and just many different opinions about him come into play. So I'm not quite sure how it's going to turn out. I'm very curious to see how it's going to turn out. I don't expect it to be a huge hit, but it has my attention. Definitely has my attention.
As far as the good and the bad, is M. Night Shyamalan's attachment to this film a little bit of both, you think?
Yeah, it's kind of mixed. I would almost lean towards bad, only because and I feel kind of it's unfair to her because this is her directorial debut and she's just the daughter of Shyamalan, but it's just having Shyamalan's name attached it just automatically brings something to, like, even me, like, even the way I'm talking about it, like, oh, she probably had some advice, or she probably worked a little bit with her father on it, which when you think about that, it's like, well, is he really the best director to get advice for with your first movie? You know what I mean? Like there's association with it that is mixed, because on the one hand, big director name, he's had some magnificent hits, but he's also a name that brings up a lot of controversial conversations within the movie fandom. So it'll be very interesting. I hope that I hope she's able to stand on her own with this. I hope this movie's able to stand on its own. I hope that she's able to stand on her own as a director, because that's another thing too, is there's going to be comparison. Especially
does the nepo baby, does the nepotism angle of her getting this film out in theaters in summer movie season with a wide release at 22 years old, is that a negative for you? Is that part of the bad?
Not for me personally. I'm sure some people will have the nepotism. For me, I don't really subscribe to nepotism very much. For me, it's just kind of life. We're all dealt different cards. We all have different, like, I even thinking about it for like YouTube channels. There are some people who are able to go to early fan screenings and get their reviews out like a week before the movie comes out. I'm not able to do that. Some people have to work Friday nights for like in the evenings and can't see the movie on Friday, but I don't have to do that. I can see it on Friday night. So it's all about getting, like, every life has different cards dealt. And in this case, she ended up being the daughter of a famous director. So that was her card dealt in life. It gave her a step up, sure, but it's just what she was dealt with. And I don't think it's fair to, any movie getting made is hard work. Any movie getting made has to go through a system, has to go through a process. It's not easy to get a movie made, and it's even harder to make the movie. So I don't want to just say, oh, she's M. Night Shyamalan's daughter, of course she has a movie, because she didn't. She even could have gone a different direction in life. She didn't have to do the directing route. And if she happened to be born from a famous director, good for her. Like, I'm looking forward to seeing if the M. Night Shyamalan legacy will continue through her. That's actually really cool if you think about it, because we're not going to have M. Night Shyamalan forever as a director, but now we've got a new Shyamalan. That could be really cool.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you, because I think that, yes, nepotism definitely plays a role, absolutely, especially at that age, but it's one of those things where she's got to deliver.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, she gets the advantage of her father being a Hollywood director. Yes, absolutely. But even with all those connections, if this movie tanks at the box office or is awful in its construction, or just, if it sucks,
yeah,
no studio is going to come out and give her $100 million and say, go make another movie.
Exactly.
So it is a huge risk for her to take at that young of an age. And to a certain extent, it's a huge risk for M. Night Shyamalan to put one of his daughters in that position. I think about like Jason Reitman, being Ivan Reitman's son. He worked his way up through the indie movie scene.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he's his father's son. Yes, he's the son of a famous Hollywood director, but he worked his way up through the indie movie scene and did movies for, like, Thank You for Smoking. He went to film school, did all of those things. And so when he then took over the Ghostbusters franchise, he was able to work on it with his dad.
Yeah. And
he had already established himself to a certain extent, on his own 2 feet. He had done Oscar-nominated films. So it is kind of interesting to see two different second-generation Hollywood royalty directors making big-budget films and different ways of getting there. But yeah, I'm hopefully... to me, that's more of a good thing than a bad thing. Yes, nepotism, obviously, but I like the idea that if she's that mature at 22 years old to lead a Hollywood production with hundreds of employees, dozens of actors, and is able to do that, to me, that's part of the good. What about the meh? Is there anything about this, either the M. Night Shyamalan factor itself, or is there going to be a twist, and is it, it's dark, and it's moody? And, is there a meh factor in here, too, for you at all with this project?
Nothing that really sticks out right off the top of my head about a meh. I mean, even the premise sounds pretty cool. Like I kind of said, like it does sound like a mixture of a bunch of different M. Night Shyamalan movie elements. but the way they come together in the premise does sound intriguing to me. Yeah, I don't think there's a meh for me at the moment. I don't expect it to do crazy numbers in the box office. Basically, is the meh is like, this kind of feels like a movie that's going to go under the radar, and if it's really good, maybe it'll get like rediscovered and people will be like, why didn't anyone go and see this in the theaters? This is awesome. But other than that, I don't really think there's anything attached to it that makes me think meh at the moment.
So is this a film that you think will be a streaming gem come fall, when horror films start coming out? You know, when it's horror movie season, once the weather starts turning a little colder. Do you think that this is the type of film that will find a second life on streaming?
Yeah, if it's good. I think the worst thing that could happen to this movie is if it feels like one of the worst, or one of the lesser M. Night Shyamalan movies. Like, I feel like if she doesn't put her own print on it, if it doesn't feel distinct enough, like you kind of mentioned there, if we're expecting a twist, or if she tries to do a twist and the twist is terrible, like if she tries to do something that feels very close to what M. Night Shyamalan would do, I feel like that would hurt her quite a bit, honestly. So hopefully she's able to find her own voice and her own route, but I think it's going to be very difficult. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, and for me, the meh factor is, if there is a twist where Bruce Willis shows up and drowns in half an inch of water, that to me, if there's something like that, to me that's got to be, as the post factor of the meh of it all. So for this film, is this a good, bad, or meh? And are you planning on watching in theaters?
I'm going to say it's a good, because even though it's Shyamalan's name attached, it's a new voice. And I think new voices in Hollywood are always good. I think new perspectives and new angles brought to film is always a good thing. And it's an original idea as far as I know. It sounds original. It sounds like it's got a good cast. I'm going to lean towards good. And I think I'll check it out.
Nice. Yeah, me too. I'm not sure if I'm actually going to go see it in theaters, but it is one that did grab my attention, and the fact that it's got such strong visuals. Yes, that's credit to the cinematographer, but also I think is a credit to Ishana Shyamalan and her directorial sense too. So I also put this kind of leaning good, but this is definitely one that could fall into the meh.
Yeah.
If it's not
it's
done
a mixed
right.
bag.
Yes, absolutely. Moving on to our next film. I'm making these switches quicker. And restart. Oh, it helped if I actually did that. Yay! Okay. There, now it's playing. Yay! This one is... Oh. Sorry, thought I had it. Sorry, folks, thought I had it. Oh. That's just me screwing up that part there. This is... I want to take that down. This one is Inside Out 2. This is from Pixar. This is the sequel to the 2015 movie Inside Out. This is returning most of the original voice cast from the film. This is Amy Poehler as Joy. This is Phyllis Smith, or Phyllis from The Office, as Sadness. Mindy Kaling, interestingly, did not come back to voice her role. But we do have a couple of new roles in this film.
And Bill Hader didn't come back too, right? Bill Hader. I think
he was
Fear.
I don't believe he came back. We have Maya Hawke in this one as Anxiety. We have Liza Lepara as she's taking over for Mindy Kaling as Disgust. Tony Hale's coming in as Fear. I love the voice cast in here, and it's the same premise as the first film. It's the different emotions we have inside of our head, and those emotions fighting for control of our bodies. And in this case, it's the emotions in charge of a girl named Riley. And this film takes place when Riley becomes a teenager. So, new emotions.
Oh, yeah.
What are your thoughts on Inside Out 2?
I think it's great. I think Inside Out is the franchise within Pixar that has the most potential to be their next Toy Story. I think aside from Toy Story, Pixar franchises haven't really worked out as well as Toy Story did going into the sequels. But I feel like Inside Out has kind of the same ingredients that Toy Story had to make it great, because you're dealing with a kid who's aging, and you're telling the story of their aging through, in Toy Story's case, the inanimate objects of the toys. In this case, the emotions inside her head. And the older Riley gets, I just think there's more stories to tell. So I think that this is a brilliant idea to do another Inside Out, because I loved the first Inside Out, and the first Inside Out was one of the most beloved Pixar films in the last decade for sure. So I think going back to that, and I just think there is endless possibilities to tell with Inside Out, because of how relatable the story is to us, because it deals with just like growing up and adolescence, and how your emotions change and affect you as you get older. So I'm really, really interested to see them play with the idea of Riley entering puberty, and knowing Pixar, they're gonna find such emotion and layers and themes to play with within that idea. I think it's gonna be great.
Yeah, me too. This is another one that I'm really, really optimistic optimistic for. And there's a scene in the trailer, in one of the trailers, where Joy and the older emotions get kicked out, and they have to yell for help, and they have to yell across this giant chasm, and it turns out to be a sarcasm.
Yeah.
And it's just like the idea of a sarcasm for teenagers, where they're yelling across, "Oh, I so want to be helped out by you right now." It's just such a funny thought experiment. But yeah, it's genius, and it just the way the way that it's presented is just it looks awesome. So that's part of the good for me. Anything? What are the good parts, do you think, for you for this film?
Yeah, like I said, I think the good parts are just like this, where they've taken the story for this one, like how they've aged Riley up, how they're dealing with new emotions that she's dealing with at that age. I think is going to be really fun for adults to look back on and remember, and really informative and important for kids who are going through it to relate to. I just think it has the 4-quadrant element to it. I think parents, I think grandparents, I think kids, I think teenagers, I think everyone's going to be able to relate to this movie. And the biggest thing is that it's Pixar, and we've seen what Pixar can do when they deal with these kind of stories. You know, we know what to expect. We know that they go deeper than some animated movies would go, and especially coming off of that first film, which I think just like, I mean, you say Bing Bong, people still break down into tears the minute you say it. Like, it had such an emotional impact and such a lasting um, just imprint on our culture. Still, people talk about Inside Out, and it's our Inside Out is, like I said, one of the best Pixar movies they've done, maybe the best Pixar they've done in the last decade. So I think this is gonna be a smash hit. I think this has the potential to be even the biggest of June. So yeah, I think it's gonna do really well. I can't really think of a negative. I can't really think of a meh. I mean, does it kind of suck that Bill Hader and Mindy aren't coming back? I guess, but they're voice actors. You're really not going to notice a difference, I don't think. You still have Amy Poehler coming in there. It all sounds the same. It all sounds like it fits with the original. I think it's gonna. I have no worries about it. I think it's gonna be great.
Yeah, me too. And for me, there's not really anything negative that I can come up with for a bad. And I echo that what you just said. The fact that Mindy Kaling's not back, it surprises me a little bit, because, you know, it's not like you have to be on set. You can go and record in studio at pretty much any time over a couple-year period. These Pixar movies take years to produce, so that part does surprise me a little bit, just because, you know, when you're an actor and you can get voice work like a Pixar film, and it's such a huge hit, and everyone likes your role in it, it does surprise me that she wouldn't come back for the sequel, or wasn't able to free up the time, or that, I mean, heck, we don't know. They could have potentially not invited her back. Honestly, we don't know. But I did like her in the first film, so that would be like the biggest bad part. But yeah, I'm a huge. I think you also said it very well when you said this is one of the best Pixar movies of the last 10 years. It is highly memorable. The first film was highly memorable. It is a ton of fun, and I think Pixar has way more hits than misses. And of the last 10 years of the original Pixar movies that have come out that haven't been sequels, for me, Inside Out was by far the biggest original first film that they've done in the series. So, I am really excited for this film. Is there anything that's a meh? Is there anything that's kind of like, I see what you're going for there, but it's, anything that pulls out your inner Richard kind.
The only meh I could think of, and it's kind of a stretch, but I'll say it anyways. Elemental, for me, was kind of too punny when it came to the jokes. It felt like a lot of their jokes were just the puns that they could come up with. There hopefully won't be that humor in this movie where it's just kind of punny, but there was a couple things I can't remember off the top of my head like specifics, but I just remember in the trailer there was a couple things where I was like, that feels kind of Elemental punny to me, which like very minor. Like I would say like 99% of the trailer I loved. It was just like a little element that's like hardly even worth bringing up because it's so unmemorable. But hopefully the movie won't fall into that for me, because the Elemental humor didn't really work for me all that much, because I just found that it was just pun after pun for a majority of it. And I just feel like Pixar is usually smarter with their humor than that. So hopefully we don't get too much of that in this one.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. Dad jokes versus just puns. And I can't, I have a decent sense for comedy. I love comedy, but you're right. The dad joke of it all, the pun, the over reliance on puns of it all that we saw in Elementals, it's a little bit to me. I think the difference between Pixar and Disney, and yes, Disney owns Pixar, so in some ways they're one and the same company. But that is a really good point. Of there's something just more well developed about Pixar, and maybe it's because they spend years working on a script and refining the script and the vocal, the takes from their actors and the animation process. And it really is like the Tiffany's of all animation. But yeah, other than saying, well, they're just better at the puns and the dad, and to where it doesn't come across as a dad joke. I agree 100%. There's nothing that's a meh factor here. The only thing that I do worry about a little bit is the sequelness of it all, because like, for example, the thing that's popping in my head for whatever reason is The Incredibles 2. And I love The Incredibles. One of the best animated films of all time. And The Incredibles 2 is good. Yeah. But it's not great. It's not all-time great animation film like I agree. The Incredibles is. And I think that I don't think Inside Out is as good as The Incredibles, but it is really solid. It is really good. And I think that this premise is different enough, and it's at a different enough time in Riley's life as a teenager versus being a newborn baby, that I think the jokes won't be the same the second time around. But that does worry me a little bit. It's not in the bad category, but it is a potential meh. And it's the only meh for me, is the idea that it ends up being in The Incredibles 2 as opposed to Toy Story 2.
There's one more kind of worry I could think about, actually, now that we're kind of talking about it a bit more. You said that these take years to produce, which they do. So this movie was most likely made during the Bob Chapek CEO rule at Disney, which when Bob Chapek was at Disney, the Pixar creatives were stripped of their creative control, and they were replaced with businessmen and layers of management that they had to go through. And everyone, it's very famously known that everyone at Pixar and Disney were upset with how everything was run when Bob Chapek was there. So I don't think that that's going to be much of a worry. But now that we kind of talk about how long it's been in the process for, this might have some Chapek on it. So that might hurt it a bit. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out. It looks great, but we'll see.
Hey Bob, I think you stepped in some Chapek there. Oh, Chapek. Yeah, it is on the bottom of my shoe. That's gross. Interesting too that it is a first-time director for this film, Kelsey Mann, who is a man. I looked it up. He's a long-time Pixar creative team member, but this is his first directorial debut of a film. And I know they always say that if you're going to be a Hollywood director, you want your first film to be a sequel in a franchise, because a lot of the directorial decisions have already been made. So hopefully this is a soft landing for him in Inside Out 2. But I'm really excited for this film. For me, this falls in the good category, and I do plan on watching this in theaters. How about you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'm stretching to find meh. I'm stretching to find bad. Like I think this is gonna be great. I honestly expect this to be, if not one of, then the biggest hit of June.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I think it'll be.
Yeah, I could totally see that happening too. The next film, and it's interesting because this next film it's not a huge blockbuster, and I was trying to keep this list to huge blockbusters, but because Inside Out 2 comes out June 14th, June 21st doesn't have a whole lot of films that are willing to go up against Pixar. So this is called The Bikeriders. Mm-hmm. It has Jodie Comer, it has Tom Hardy, and it has Elvis himself, Austin Butler, in one of the first roles following his Oscar nomination for Elvis. This is an original story. It is, it kind of feels a lot like films that we've seen before, where it's a love triangle, it's two men and their friendship, and then the woman that kind of comes between them. It's 60s bikers. It's sort of, kind of looks a little bit like Hell's Angels. It kind of sort of looks like Sons of Anarchy, but like a prequel. Have you seen the trailers for the Bikeriders, and what are your thoughts on the premise for this film?
I have seen the trailer for this, and I'm very intrigued by this movie because not only does it have a great cast, Austin Butler, Tom Hardy in there, what has me really intrigued about this movie the most is this movie was supposed to come out last year. This movie was supposed to come out, I believe, in December of last year, to the point that there was trailers playing for this movie only a couple weeks before it was going to be released. And then Disney decided to just drop it. And they didn't want it anymore. And they sold it. And then another company picked it up, and now it's coming out this year. That has me really interested because the trailers have looked great. The actors have looked great. Why did Disney drop it? That's my big question. Because there hasn't really been any official statement for it. And I don't know if it has anything to do with the quality of the film, or like if Disney just thought, oh, this is a little bit too much to put out from us, even under our Searchlight banner. But I don't see that really being a big deal. So I'm just kind of left scratching my head of like, what about this movie was Disney saying nope? To the point that they dropped it, like they got rid of it while it was only a couple days from being in front of our eyes. Like that baffles me, and I have no idea why they did that.
Yeah, that kind of confuses me too. This was a film that was on my fall movies list that I was looking forward to, and yeah, that surprised me because this is a film that I was thinking was going to be an indie movie that was going to be on less than 1,000 screens. Mm-hmm. And it was going to be one that I thought, whenever you see a film like this that has A-list talent, that has good cinematography, that has an interesting premise, but not a 4-quadrant movie that's going to attract everybody, it's the kind of thing that makes me wonder, Austin Butler coming off Oscar nominations for Elvis, Tom Hardy, Jodie Comer also kind of coming into her own now as a huge star. So this is the kind of thing that I was wondering, okay, is this going to be an Oscar bait type film? So for it to be pulled at the last minute like that is really, it's confusing to me. The only thing that I could come up with at the time was, well, with the writer's strike and with the actor's strike, then the Hollywood productions weren't in full tilt for all of summer and fall, so they needed to save some ammunition for 2024 while the industry kind of catches back up with itself. That was the only thing that kind of made sense to me. And then when I saw that the Bikeriders was getting a June release, I don't know how wide this release is going to be, but the Bikeriders to me does not feel like a summer blockbuster that's coming out mid-June. That's gonna have promotional deals tied in with McDonald's or tied in with Ford or Harley Davidson or whoever. Like, this is not one that I would expect to be a huge blockbuster. So the fact that this is getting a June release really surprises me. And it kind of dovetailing off what you said about Disney. Why is it not releasing this? Is this somehow just fooling everybody and it's not a good film? This is from a writer-director named Jeff Nichols. And it was interesting because when I was doing my research for the films this month, Jeff Nichols he's in his 40s, but he was attached to do A Quiet Place Day One. He was attached to be the writer-director of that film. He was on the project for roughly a year, and then he left. Just sort of left, and then it went to the guy who is there now, who ended up writing and directing that film. So the fact that it's a writer-director who was hired and then fired for another high-profile project coming out this summer, this obviously is not a huge budget project, but it does have great talent behind it. So, I don't quite know what to make of it, but it's got really strong visuals to it and an amazing cast. And on top of that, it's really interesting because in the same way that Thomas Lennon is in every single Christopher Nolan film, Michael Shannon is in every Jeff Nichols film. So take that for what it is. Michael Shannon, like, love him or hate him, but to me, he was the best part of Man of Steel as Zod. So, So anyway, Michael Shannon also in this film. To me, all these things are goods for the most part. Anything bad stand out about the trailers for this film or the setup for this film?
The only bad I can think of is like the fact that it got pulled and sold, and I'm just like, I don't know, just like that. Like, why didn't Disney believe in it? Is kind of the first thing you kind of think of, right? Is like, what happened with it that it wasn't for them anymore? Like, that's the only thing I could, because everything else looks great. The cast looks great. I thought the trailer had a great tone, a great look, like you said, great visuals. It looked like it was Oscar baity. It was coming out around the time that Oscar baity movies come out, and then it wasn't anymore, and now they put it in June, which is it's the whole situation with it has just kind of been baffling. And I think that for right or wrong, for fair or unfair, it does put a little bit of a stigma on this movie of like, there's something going on with you, and I want to find out what it is.
Is there a little bit of a Chapek factor here? Like, do you think the filmmaker stepped in some Chapek on the way to the theater?
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head well enough if this would have been made around the Chapek time or not. And it's also Searchlight, so I don't know how Disney works with them necessarily, because they're technically 20th Century Studios and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know how separate they are from that, because obviously I don't work at Disney and I don't claim to be like a professional expert or on analysis on all this stuff, but I definitely dabble in it a little bit. So I keep up with what's going on. But I don't know. I don't have to worry about the Chapek on this one too much, but something happened with it, and I'm just, maybe we'll watch it and we'll be like, you know what, that was a phenomenal movie, one of the best of the year. I don't know what Disney was thinking. Maybe we'll step out and be like, yeah, I would have sold it too. Like, we'll see.
Is there any bit of a meh factor when you see this? Like, well, it's Austin Butler playing the good-looking young troubled youth kind of thing. Is there anything? Is the predictableness of it? Is there anything about this that's kind of goes into?
I think only what you were talking about before, where it's like, this isn't really the kind of movie I want to watch during the summer. You know, like I'm looking for those Deadpool and Wolverines. I'm looking for those Inside Out 2s. I'm looking for those, excitement. Yeah, the summer movie season is here. Quiet Place Day 1, Twisters. Yeah, this one I'm like, I could see a lot of people waiting for streaming on this one.
Yeah, I kind of, and you did a really good job of setting up all the behind-the-scenes stuff that led to this film getting pushed to summertime from fall, which is a really bizarre thing to do for a small indie film. I'm a little bit worried on two factors, and I love the three lead actors in this film. I love all three of them. But if I'm being honest, the Tom Hardy as an artiste thing, because we know that Tom Hardy loves doing artsy films where he has his face covered up, whether it's Mad Max,
right,
or
Bane,
Dark Knight,
yeah.
Or what was the one where he was the World War II one with Christopher Nolan, where he had his face covered up because he was a pilot?
Dunkirk.
Yeah, Dunkirk. Yeah. So we know that Tom Hardy's an artsy fartsy guy, and that's not a bad thing. But it does worry me. Don't forget what?
Don't forget Venom.
Oh, yeah, face covered up again as well. Absolutely. But that does worry me a little bit. I mean, he's not covering up his face in this one, other than saying, okay, well, he's got a beard and he's got to have the motor oil and stuff over because he's a biker, and that worries me a little bit. And then the Austin Butler troubled youth doing his best James Dean impersonation.
I was thinking James Dean too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, clearly he's channeling that at least a little bit, and that might be
type era.
Yeah, and that clearly I think is a little bit director intent, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. And then Jodie Comer's a very attractive woman, so the fact that she's, I hate to say dumbing herself down, but like she's the frumpiest version of Jodie Comer that I've ever seen. And the fact that they're trying to make her look very coal miner's daughter kind of thing. It surprises me to a certain extent that the love interest for the guy who played Elvis, who's playing a James Dean archetype, is going to settle for the very frumpy version of Jodie Comer. A little bit. That kind of worries me a little bit, where it's a little bit of the, they're choices, but are they? To me, those are potentially choices.
Right.
So is the Bikeriders one that for you is the good, the bad, or the meh? And are you planning on actually watching this film?
I'm going to say I lean towards bad, only because of where it's placed. I don't think it was smart to put this in the summer, and we'll see how it does. I don't expect it to do well. And I think just the behind-the-scenes story has really put a stigma on it for me. But I plan on seeing it. I do think the trailers look good. I think the actors in it are all talent that I'm looking forward to watching. It's just got a lot of outside factors to it where I'm like, does not bode well for this movie.
Will you watch it in theaters, or is this one that you wait for streaming?
Well, if I'm gonna watch it in theaters, it's only probably gonna be to review it. But it's not gonna be like a priority. Like if something else comes up, or if I have to go somewhere, then I'm not gonna end up seeing this. But if I have nothing going on, I'll check it out.
Inside Out 2 for a second time, or the Bikeriders for the first time?
If Inside Out 2 is as great as I want it to be, I'll probably choose Inside Out 2 for a second time.
Good point. I'm also one. I think this might be one that I wait for streaming, and to me, it falls in the good category. But there's enough question marks behind it to where I'm probably going to hold off from seeing it in theaters, which does surprise me a little bit, because this is generally one that I would generally try and watch in theaters. Our next Our next film is, it's a big budget film. It is the third film in the film franchise. It is technically a prequel, but not by more than a year or two. This is A Quiet Place. If you ever watched The Quiet Place and thought this is a great film, but I wonder how the aliens got here, this is the film that is trying to answer that question.
Or just watch the first 20 minutes of A Quiet Place Part 2.
Yeah, that too. So in this one, we see the trailers of the aliens invading Earth. We see Lupita Nyongo in New York, kind of surviving because she has plot armor. This is it is A Quiet Place Day 1. I think this looks pretty good. I love the setup of it, and anytime you can get John Krasinski involved in something, even though he's only the co-writer or he's credited as a writer, probably from the characters. What are your thoughts on the trailer for A Quiet Place Day 1?
I'm mixed on this one. If it was the first movie, there was no Quiet Place or Quiet Place Part 2, I would think it looks awesome. And I do think it looks awesome. I think the trailer looks great. The problem for me with this one is the fact that we have A Quiet Place and we have A Quiet Place Part 2, and we know how these monsters got defeated at the end of A Quiet Place Part 1. We know about the frequency. Yeah. They don't know about that yet, but we will. And A Quiet Place Part 2 kind of did a short film version of this where we already saw the first invasion. It wasn't in New York, obviously, but it was in a small town. And even in that small town, when they first arrived and no one knew the rules about don't make sound, people were getting slaughtered left and right. It was a bloodbath. And I can't help but think of okay, you're going back, you're doing a prequel for this. I already know how to take down these monsters. I already know that you can't make sound. I already have the knowledge that these characters won't, and you're putting them in the loudest city possible. How on earth are you even going to be able to tell a story? How like everyone should just be getting demolished every second. There should be no room for 2 hours for this movie. This movie should be over in 5 seconds, in my opinion. So it's going to be interesting to see how they get around that. I think, if I remember correctly, the character in the movie is deaf as well. I think they're doing that again, like they did with the daughter in the family in the first one, which worked because that explained why the family knew sign language and why they were able to survive. It's going to be interesting to see how they get around the fact that this person's deaf and she's not going to die right away because she doesn't know about sound. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see how they go about this one, because on surface level, it looks like a fun alien invasion action film. But when I think about A Quiet Place and what we've gotten before and how this fits in, I'm iffy. I'm very iffy.
So would you say that's in the category?
Yeah.
Because to me, A Quiet Place was such a pleasant surprise.
Absolutely,
of several years ago, and yeah, it's a simple setup, and it's the storytelling is superb and so well executed, and it's just of course it's John Krasinski wanting to work with his wife. Who wouldn't want to work with Emily Blunt? And it's sort of one of those. It's sort of one of those interesting things too. Of if they ever had the big budget.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, the studio went, okay, well, yeah, we'll give you a big budget. And so now all of a sudden we're taking the indie movie darling of a couple of years ago and saying, boom, here's the big Cloverfield alien invasion thing. And so that worries me a little bit. To me, that does kind of venture into the category a little bit, but just a little bit. I think because the whole alien invasion thing has been done and redone so many times, but because John Krasinski was behind that first film, and it was so well conceived that so much of that thought has already gone into the production of this film even before it even took over.
Yeah.
In the same way that I was saying before about Jeff Nichols being initially named to direct A Quiet Place Day 1. the director of this film, Michael Szymanski, he's done little bits here and there, television mostly. There's nothing really significant that I've seen in his filmography that really makes me say, oh, that's a brilliant choice for a big budget third film in a series. I don't really have any opinion on Michael Szymanski as a writer-director, but he is the director and he's the co-writing. He has co-writing credits. So, the fact that we have three writers credited kind of worries me a little bit, and that probably is just John Krasinski because he created the characters and he created the world. So that might be why he has the writing credit, and it's just Michael Szymanski who wrote the thing. I don't know, but that does worry me a little bit. So that is a great tagline, though. Experience the day the world went quiet. That is a great tagline.
Amazing tagline. Everything about it feels like it would work if it wasn't a prequel. Like if
it's only a prequel. It's only a prequel by a year, though. It's day one, and they were day 400 and something.
Yeah, something like that.
So it's not like it's 20 years earlier. It's not like we're going to see Jar Jar Binks running through the streets and.
But doesn't in that way, in some ways, doesn't it just kind of feel like a prologue that's been stretched out to be a feature-length movie? Like, doesn't it just kind of feel like they are taking the first part of part two, placing it in a different setting, and then just stretching it out? Like, that's the one thing that I'm baffled by with this decision is I'd rather just have a Quiet Place Part 3. I'd rather them just to focus all their energy in going forward and completing the story in that sense, or even focusing on a different family in another part of the town. But I don't know, just going back to the first day it happened to me is kind of like, I feel like I'm going to watch something I already know and seen before. That's kind of how I feel about it in some ways, just in New York.
And I think that's part of the brilliance of this, though. I think part of that is because we're not following John Krasinski in New York on a day trip for some reason.
Oh, that'd be awful. That would be terrible.
So it's a completely new set of characters. I have seen A Quiet Place Part 2, but I don't remember if there's any of these. Just looking at the cast list, I don't know if anyone here is crossing over with the second film. But obviously, it's a whole new set of characters for the most part. It's in New York. Yes, we've seen New York blown up by aliens before, but I think you said it right, where it's one of the noisiest, loudest cities on the face of the earth. So the fact that this is where aliens are attacking first kind of makes sense, especially given the type of aliens that are there. But I wonder if there's a bigger plan for this franchise, given that John Krasinski's involved. He's very intelligent. He doesn't do anything half-cocked. So I'm wondering if there's, if A Quiet Place Day 1 does well, I wonder if there's a plan for Lupita Nyong'o's character and Djimon Hounsou's character to meet up with the other cast for a meet-up film, for a team-up film, if you will, in A Quiet Place Part 4.
Yeah.
And create a Quiet Place cinematic universe.
I could see them trying to do that, absolutely. Or an anthology or something like that.
Yeah, A Quiet Place, the search for, a Quiet Place, the search for trying to find a place to count your money. Hopefully, I'm optimistic for this film. I haven't been disappointed yet with this film series, and anything John Krasinski to me falls in the good category. Is there anything for you that's in the bad or the meh?
Well, John Krasinski's not directing this one. I think that's kind of disappointing. And I feel like the trailers have put a real focus on the invasion and on the aliens. And I feel like the magic of A Quiet Place is the family. Like the aliens aren't really the focus, it's the characters. And I feel like that's why it worked so well for me. So I'm hoping that what you said is the truth. I'm hoping that we follow just these new characters and we love these new characters and it's the characters first over the aliens. But if they try to put the aliens front and center and just make it about that, I feel like it's going to lose something special that A Quiet Place had. So that worries me a little bit. But like I said, other than A Quiet Place and Quiet Place 2 already existing, the movie did look very entertaining from the trailers. Like, I'm definitely going to see it. I hope I love it. I'm just worried about how it's going to feel placed where it's at.
The potential meh thing, and I hope it's not, and that's why I say it's a potential meh, is if this turns out to be just an alien invasion story.
Yeah.
It looks like it's well executed, and I'd be okay with that to a certain extent. But I'm wondering if, because the trailers are showing all the high-budget special effects CGI, showing the alien invasion stuff, I wonder if they're holding out on whatever the true parts of the story that they're going to be telling are. And not just be quiet. We got, be quiet, the aliens are coming.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a good chunk of this story that they're trying not to spoil for us. And
I hope so.
Because the storytelling was so brilliant, and you're right, 100% on point, everything character-driven about the first film, I'm hoping that there's character tie-ins also with this film, and that's part of the story that we're not being told in the trailer. So if this is the filmmaker and the studio saying, let's just put all the really expensive special effects CGI in the trailer, and that'll whet everyone's appetite, and we'll save the story elements for when people actually watch the film, and actually have some self-restraint, which everyone who survives A Quiet Place will have to do anyway to survive.
Right.
I'm hoping that that's what this is. So the potential meh is, it's just an alien invasion story. I hope that's not the case. I don't think that'll be the case, but that's the potential meh for me. For you, is this a good, bad, or meh on Quiet Place Day 1, and are you planning on watching it in theaters?
I'm going to take my concerns of it being a prequel out and just say it's good. Because I do think, judging it on its own merits, which is fair, the trailer was good. It looked entertaining. I like the cast. And it's a blockbuster movie in the summer that I look forward to seeing. So definitely planning on seeing it, hoping it's great, rooting for it. Little worried, but I think overall good.
Me too. For me, this falls in the good category, and I do plan on watching this in theaters. I'm not saying it's a can't miss, but I do plan to watch this in theaters. And then is this one that you will go to see with your dad? Is this like a take dad to the movies?
Yeah, I think he'd be into it.
Experience?
I think he'd be into it.
Nice. Let's move on to our next film, which is... our next film is... Our next film is the first of two, and it's got a lot of great cinematography, which automatically falls in the good category. It's got a one of the most generic names that I've ever heard on a film title ever. Horizon. An American Saga. Chapter 1. And anytime you have a couple of different punctuation, if punctuation becomes a thing with both a colon and a dash, that kind of worries me a little bit. I do love Kevin Costner, and it's been well documented, all of the Kevin Costner divorce stuff that led him to leave Yellowstone, yada yada yada. But this is a film that it's the American West, and I love the idea of this film. I do have my worries though, and this is a two-parter, and this is sort of interesting because we don't generally see films, especially of this budget level and this many A-list actors, produced at the same time. I mean, we generally don't see two movies produced because that's hundreds of millions of dollars that we're talking about. Obviously, there's not a ton of CGI here; it's mostly in-camera type stuff. But I love the setup of this post-Civil War Western expansion type thing. And Kevin Costner in a Western, to me, is always a good thing, too. But what are your initial thoughts on the setup for Horizon, an American Saga? As a Canadian.
As a Canadian. It's risky. This is a risk, I think. I don't know how well this is going to do, honestly. I'm very curious to see how well it's going to do. I think that it's really cool that they're doing part 1 in theaters in June, and I believe part 2 is in August. I think
August 16th.
Yeah, August. Yeah, so that's incredibly cool, and there's a possibility that part 1 and part 2 will be in theaters at the same time. So if you wanted to jump from one theater to the next and just do part 1, part 2 in your day, that'd be awesome. So maybe people will hold off to do that too. I don't know. But yeah, Kevin Costner definitely has a lot of fans and some praise from Yellowstone, and it's just westerns. Do they still do well in theaters? When was the last time we had a real western in theaters that did well? I don't know. You're not going to get Gen Z in here, or the youngsters. It's very. I'm very curious to see how this one's going to do, because I think it looks good. I definitely think it looks good. I just think it's such a niche genre that I'm worried for its performance. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this pans out, because not only do you have one, you have another one. So like, if part 1 doesn't do well, like, then you've got another part in August coming out. Like, I don't know what that's going to look like for you, but it's definitely ambitious to just like trust the audience and put them both out in the same year, months apart.
You got another one coming too. So okay, so that you bring up an interesting point. You're 25, so are you technically Gen Z?
I just missed it basically. I'm 98, so
So you're
kind of
the end of millennials, slightly too old to be Gen Z.
Yeah, I'm kind of like one foot in each door kind of thing. Like,
okay,
I remember VCRs, but I had a VCR. I have VHSs, but
so as speaking for everyone your age, you'll make you the mouthpiece of your generation for a second. Do westerns speak much to you as a film genre, as an entire type of film? And does this film, I mean, yeah, it's got a lot of great visuals, but does the subject matter interest you in the least?
Westerns are not my favorite. There's definitely some, like The Good, Bad, and the Ugly obviously is great. Fistful of Dollars I liked. I love Unforgiven. Like, all the Clint Eastwood kind of stuff I've kind of seen. But I can't think of anyone that would want to go see this with me, my age. Like, honestly, I can't like, aside from my brother, who kind of just loves going to films too, and loves filmmaking and loves watching anything that we can get our hands on, basically. I can't think of anyone else my age that would be interested in seeing this, that I know personally, anyways, and isn't a big movie buff.
Now, did you like Dances with Wolves?
Actually, I've never seen it. It's been on my watch list for a long time.
I highly recommend Dances with Wolves. It won Best Picture. I even watched the 4-hour and 14-minute director's cut of Dances with Wolves, and it still holds up. Completely different style of a film than this, because this is more like an action western. It looks like this is an epic western kind of thing. That was more of a quiet, character piece kind of thing. Although it did have some big set piece elements to it as well, but it was highly recommended. It's a really solid film.
All right.
For you, when obviously the visuals, the cinematography falls into the good category. What kind of falls into the bad category when you think about this project?
I think just the fact that it's a western, kind of. I mean, I don't know if that's a genre that is going to. I don't know if there's life in it, honestly. Like, we have like western types, like Logan was a western type story in the comic book genre, but like a straight up western, like horses and everything, like the desert, like all that kind of stuff. I just don't know the appeal that has. And I don't know, once again, if this is a movie people are looking to watch in the summer. Like, I think my grandparents will go see it. I think my grandparents will be excited to go see this one, and maybe I'll join them to watch it. Maybe they'll be the only people I can find to watch it with me. But other than that, I'm not. And there's a little bit of like, your part 1 of this is in the title, right?
Yeah.
So you've made it a western and you've made it a part 1. I think those are two big mistakes right there.
Chapter 1, technically chapter 1.
Chapter 1. Either way, the audience, part one has. I think part ones have been proven. It's a bad idea to attach it to a title because it tells the audience it's an incomplete film. I'm gonna have to wait anyway, so I'll just wait for part two. And on top of that, being a western, um, I don't know, maybe 50,000 opening weekend.
Yeah,
I don't know.
so for me, the thing that comes up in the bad category is the entire point of view through which this film looks like it's being told. I love 80. I'm a child of the 70s, so I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And when I see this trailer, in the same way that, like, if you think back to Hot Tub Time Machine, came out in 2010, but it was basically an homage to 80s films.
Right.
This kind of feels like it's a film plot and perspective and point of view of Western expansion, American idealism, manifest destiny, the kind of thing that you saw a lot in films in the 80s and 90s, even though there weren't a lot of Westerns in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
It kind of feels like it has that overly optimistic Reagan era kind of perspective on things. And I wonder if that time has, especially when you're talking drama and not comedy.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if the perspective on this film, given that it is Kevin Costner and he made a lot of films in the 80s and 90s, I wonder if that is a perspective that is actually the point of view of this film. Or
yeah.
So that is a potential bad part for me, because I think culture has kind of moved on a bit from the 80s and 90s in terms of points of view perspectives. There's a reason why we don't see as many Westerns nowadays, and you definitely don't see, cowboys versus Indians kind of thing anymore, and you don't even really see the word Indian used very much. So the fact that we're getting Native Americans as characters, but they kind of look like caricature characters, even though, so that the whole and maybe this is just an entirely misdirect kind of thing that they've built into the trailers, where it's intentionally misleading and leading you to think that's a different type of film than it is. But that part really, really worries me, because I love Kevin Costner. I don't think that he's a man who's behind the times. But given where society has gone now, where Western society has gone, and the views on the Old West and expansionism, and quite honestly, what happened to the Native American population, the native population of North America, I worry a lot about the optimistic conquering the landscape. We're getting in a wagon train and heading out west.
Well, I mean,
that part worries me a lot.
Do we know the runtime on this? That's something I think is an interesting thing to bring up too, because one of the things I'm thinking of right now when you're bringing up Kevin Costner, and this isn't an apples and apples.
I didn't get a screenshot of it.
Okay. This isn't an apples to apples comparison, but when you're bringing up Kevin Costner and stuff like that, I'm thinking of Killers of the Flower Moon, which Killers of the Flower Moon is not a Western per se, but it kind of is the similar tone, the similar kind of, it's in the same kind of area as a Western film kind of is. And that had Leonardo DiCaprio, who I can already tell you is a bigger name amongst my generation than Kevin Costner. It had Martin Scorsese behind the camera, and it had Robert De Niro in front of the camera. And not many people went out to see. I mean, it did well for what it was, but it wasn't like it blew up the box office or anything like that. And so now you're taking a movie of a similar nature with someone who, at least in my generation, isn't as known or beloved. And you don't have Martin Scorsese behind the camera, which as a film buff, that was a big get for me to go to Killers of the Flower Moon. I think there's a lot working against this movie.
Is anything about the perspective or the point of view of the characters in this film worry you a little bit?
For me personally, it doesn't, but I can definitely see what you're saying, and I definitely think there's going to be a lot of discussion, let's say, once the film comes out about that. But for me personally, that like just watching the trailer, it looks good to me. Like the cinematography looks good, the performances look good. Like for me, who's just like looks like a good movie, I'm fine with everything in it. It's just I think there's a lot of factors for the current times where I'm like, I'm surprised it got greenlit.
I agree. Anything in the meh category for you? It's just sort of like, all right, but it's
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like what Western stories, I feel like they all kind of play pretty similarly to one another in some cases. So it's just kind of like, how different is this Western movie going to feel to Western movies of the past? And I don't really think that this is going to be a Western movie that's going to be like reinventing the Western genre or reigniting it or anything like that. So, yeah, I don't know. There's nothing about this that really strikes me as like must see.
Yeah, and I would have to echo what you just said because apparently I don't have original thoughts of my own. Yeah, it does kind of reek a little bit of adventure porn. America man conquering that I'm optimistic about this film, and I love Kevin Costner as a filmmaker. I do highly recommend watching Dances with Wolves, and I probably will try and rewatch Dances with Wolves before I go to see this movie. To me, this movie falls into the good category just from the cinematography alone, just from the fact that they actually went somewhere. That I don't think that they let. To me, this looks like a film that doesn't that they didn't allow a single green screen to be anywhere within 500 miles of the set.
Which I love that. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so I love that part of it. The whole perspective of it, the point of view of it, the world view of it, if you will, worries me quite a bit just because it feels like a movie that I've already seen 20 years ago. And, the fact that, Kevin Costner, given his age, it kind of feels like him reliving his youth a little bit is what it looks like in the trailer. But he's done more good than bad, and he's won the benefit of the doubt, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Even though Waterworld was not a good film. And that Waterworld was one of his many failures post Dances with Wolves that until Titanic came along as the quote-unquote most expensive movie of all time, Waterworld had a budget in the mid-90s of over $100 million and was the most expensive movie ever produced. And it was a huge, huge box office bust. And it wasn't an awful film. There were redeeming qualities to it, but it was not a good film. And, Kevin Costner got a lion's share of the blame for that because he was still coasting off his Oscar win.
Right.
So the fact that this is now him coming back to the director's chair 30 years later, it's been 30 years.
Is it self-financed by him? I feel like I'm remembering something about that. Like
that, I don't know. I know this was all kind of, when I was doing the research for it, he brought up the idea with studio heads back in the 80s even, so that might be why it feels like an 80s movie, 80s or 90s film. So this is a film that's been rattling around in his head for several decades. So that might be it, but I don't know if it was self-financed or not. My guess is that probably not, just because of the scale of it, the epic nature of it. I don't think that as wealthy as Kevin Costner is, and deservedly so, I don't think that he has even this much money to say, you know what, we're not going to just make one, we're going to make two. To me, the
ambitious.
Yeah, the ambition and the balls, the cojones, to film two of these films leads me to say that he's not shooting on his own dime. So for me, to me, this is a yes, and I do plan on watching it in theaters. Good, and I'm watching it in theaters. How about you? Are you planning to watch this in theaters?
Am I planning to watch it in theaters? No. If the opportunity comes up and I have the opportunity to watch it in theaters, I give it a shot. Yeah.
If your dad says, "Hey son, I want to go see this Kevin Costner film. It's near. It's late June, so it's near, but after Father's Day. As a Father's Day present to me, will you come to the theater?"
Oh yeah, absolutely. I do that.
All right.
Yeah, I do that. I'm not against the movie in any way. I hope it does well. I hope I love it. It's just not, like I said, the Western genre isn't really something I get excited for. So it's just not really my thing. But if it's a good story, if it's a good movie, yeah, I'll check it out.
Yeah, me too. I'm not huge into westerns. For me, it's westerns and horror films. I'm not really huge
same.
into. I'm trying to like them more and be more open minded. But yeah, to me, westerns and horror films are kind of the ones that fall through the cracks a little bit. And the final one for the month of June, and this was based off of your suggestion, and I love the idea of this film. It's not a film, but this is actually a streaming series. This is The Acolyte. This is from the Star Wars universe. This is a streaming. It looks like 8-episode season on Disney Plus. This is taking place during the time of the prequels era. This is like the High Republic era, and the Jedi are sort of at peak strength. But the dark side is rising. And this is a show that has Amandla Stenberg and the other lead actress was Daphne Keane from Wolverine, Logan.
Yeah, Logan.
Not Wolverine. She was a little girl in Logan. Amazing looking cast. Carrie-Anne Moss also in this film. Judas, I can't pronounce his last name, but the guy who played Chewbacca in the Chewbacca suit in the last couple of Star Wars films.
Yeah, I think he's another Wookiee in this
film. Yeah. So pretty deep cast. Tell me a little bit about The Acolyte.
Yeah, so The Acolyte I think is very interesting because for me, this is kind of like, okay, what can Disney Star Wars really be in a way? Because we've had these Disney Plus live action series come out, but they've all been connected to something we've already known. I mean, The Mandalorian season 1 kind of stood on its own, but once you got into season 2, season 3, they brought in Boba Fett, they brought in Clone Wars characters. It was all connected to that kind of stuff. Book of Boba Fett obviously was Boba Fett, connected to Mandalorian and the original trilogy. Ahsoka connected to Rebels, Clone Wars, a little bit of the prequels, bringing Hayden Christensen back. You had Obi-Wan obviously connected to the prequel. So everything's kind of been like, we've either seen these characters or there's some connection to something we've seen before. Whereas The Acolyte is taking place thousands of years before anything we've seen before. New characters, new look at the Jedi, new Sith. All of it just is new. It's new story, it's new characters, it's new setting. And that gets me excited. But going back to the Disney Plus side of everything, their series haven't been the greatest. I haven't hated them except for Book of Boba Fett. I really didn't like that one, but they've all just kind of been a little underwhelming in some way or another, except for Mandalorian season 1 and season 2. But then season 3 was even underwhelming for me. So this feels like if we're not going to have Star Wars in the theaters in the summer, this is the big Star Wars event of the summer that they're trying to get going on Disney Plus. And for me, they have just struck out many times, but this is a brand new story and brand new characters, so they can only impress at this point with what they're going to do with this. So I'm hoping that this is going to be great because it is a different side to everything that we've seen before. It's a different setting, different time period and everything. There shouldn't be any connections to anything we've seen before, but it's Disney Star Wars, so it has me a little bit worried.
And the fact that we're even saying Disney Star Wars as a phrase, that's not a compliment in general.
Yeah, I should have said Disney Plus Star Wars, but yeah.
Yeah, but the phrase Disney Star Wars has been sort of an emerging keyword, if you will. And the fact that I even thought to put Disney Star Wars on lower third for this project, kind of says a little bit about the mixed nature of their success. Like, to me, because I can't say that I've seen every Disney Star Wars series, although I think I may have seen everyone. I loved Mandalorian 1 and 2. Season 3 was not quite as good. Book of Boba Fett was, I think, some good, some bad, but it really didn't have a vision for what it wanted to be. Ahsoka,
exactly.
Ahsoka was just so full of potential, but to me, it missed the mark. I love the actors involved, but it just didn't quite do it for me. So this one, it's an interesting perspective. I didn't realize that you're saying it's thousands of years before.
I think it's supposed to be something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know.
Very far removed in the past from everything that's happened.
Yeah, just when I was doing the research for it, it looked like it said something about the High Republic, and I'm not ancient Star Wars history. I'm not as aware of. It is interesting to see, and I like the idea too of power corrupting. Absolutely. So even though the Jedi are good and represent good,
there's also supposed to be like this murder mystery angle to it, like I guess a Jedi gets killed and they don't know who did it, kind of thing.
Yeah. So this is the one that I kind of chuckled, and this is the meh factor of it for me. When I saw the trailer, and the very first thing that we see is a callback to The Watchmen. A comedian died tonight, but in this case, it's a Jedi died tonight.
Yeah, I'm
like, oh really? We're calling back to The Watchmen, really?
That is funny.
Oh God. To me that doesn't bode well just from the get go. But Star Wars. I'm a sucker for Star Wars. I'm a little bit too old to have seen the original Star Wars in theaters, but I did see Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi when they came out in theaters. I mean, I was 5 years old when Empire came out. So I'm of that generation that saw the original trilogy in theaters, and that was the gold standard of filmmaking for most people my age for a very long time, until the prequels. But then, Disney Star Wars, I think, as a streaming service, since they bought it in 2012, I think it's hit and miss. I like that they've put out a lot of stuff, but I don't like that we're getting more quantity than quality.
Yeah.
And this one, it kind of feels like we're getting a little bit of and part of the reason why I say Disney Star Wars as a phrase is there was a statement going around there for a while called that was the Force is female.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was coming from Kathleen Kennedy, who was in charge of Star Wars, and she was George Lucas's producer and Steven Spielberg's producer for the longest time, and so when Disney bought Star Wars, Kathleen Kennedy was put in charge. Yada yada yada. I'm not a huge fan of her being in charge of the creative side of things, so if this is one that kind of came as part of a mandate for the Force is female, I hate saying that because I love Amandla Stenberg and Daphne Keane. I think they're really talented actresses. I think the premise for this is a really interesting premise and doesn't have anything to do particularly with gender and all that kind of stuff. So to me, this looks like it has more to do with power and power corrupting and the idea of being a Jedi trainee, being a youngling, and washing out of the program, and then being tempted later on, being tempted by the dark side, but you don't really know it's the dark side, so it's coming in the form of self-actualization and go girl and go establish yourself. And so I wonder if that's kind of like the fresh take angle of what this show can be. I don't know if that's what this show is going to be, but I hadn't seen the trailer until you brought it up. So this is all new to me today. So I'd heard that they were coming up with something called the Acolyte, but I don't really know anything about this series other than just what I've just said. So, is there anything that I'm missing about this series that you've done more research on this than I have?
No, not too much. I mean, like I said, it's supposed to be like a murder mystery type thing with the Sith and dealing with the Jedi, and I'm not necessarily super excited for this, if I'm being honest, just because of how Disney.
You were the one that brought it up.
I know. I brought it up. I think that I brought it up mostly because I think there's a lot of potential to it. I think it's a lot of potential to be an event. I think there's a lot of potential for it to be something in Star Wars that we've been kind of craving to have for a long time. Which is fresh new storytelling, fresh new characters, fresh new setting, fresh new time period. I think the ingredients, all of it is there to make a great pie. It's just whether or not they're going to overburn it or overcook it or do something to it that ruins it, because it's 8 episodes and Disney Plus has not done the best with the pacing of their episodes, in my opinion. Like it always feels like they've made it either too short, they've rushed to the end, they didn't make it long enough, or it should have just been a movie. There's always something about it where they miscalculate. It doesn't work as a series all the time for me. So there's a part of me that's like, they should have just made this a movie like everything else, but it could end up being a good miniseries. And the thing is, I want to love Star Wars. I want to love Star Wars again. I desperately want to feel the way about Star Wars that I do about the original trilogy. I really do. And this could be the thing, but history has shown the Disney Plus TV series how I usually feel about them by the end. And that's always in the back of my mind about this one too.
You bring up an amazing point, and I love the fact that we have more Star Wars and more Marvel, and all this is coming because of Disney Plus, and all that is great. But why is it that we can't get a Disney Plus Star Wars or Marvel? I'm going to lump them both in the same category in this scenario. Why is it that we can't get a streaming series that is as long as it needs to be?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it the number of episodes does not reflect the story that the storytellers want to do? I don't understand why they're deciding on the number of episodes before they decide on the story that they want to tell. And then as a result, these filmmakers, these storytellers, are having to shoehorn or stretch the story that they're trying to tell into a number of episodes that doesn't reflect what the story they want to tell.
Yeah.
I don't understand why Disney owns all this stuff. They own their own platform. They own all this up top to bottom. And yet they don't have the self-restraint to say, okay, we should be making more episodes to tell this story. We need to expand it. Mm-hmm. Or, this story really should have been 6 episodes instead of 8. We don't need to do 2 filler episodes. We can tell this story in 6 episodes.
Yeah.
I think both of those are equally as big a problem for Disney as a whole, as a Disney Plus as a platform. And I don't understand why that's the case when they already have Netflix and HBO as examples of doing short-form storytelling in terms of limited episode counts, 6, 8, 10, 13 episodes, whatever the case may be. We have over a decade of season-long story arcs with stuff like Dexter and The Wire and Breaking Bad that they plan out the entire season ahead of time. So I don't know what it is about Disney being in charge of both Star Wars and Marvel to where even with The Mandalorian, they haven't gotten the number of episodes right.
Yeah.
They've gotten the storytelling right a couple times, but it's never the right number of episodes. So it's so frustrating and confusing to me.
The one exception on Marvel's side is Loki, and the one exception on Star Wars side is Andor.
Yes, yeah. But to me, those are the exceptions that prove the rule.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that being the part of this that I'm a little bit like, it's Disney Star Wars. I'm optimistic. I don't know much about the series creator, Leslie Headland. I don't know much about her, but I am optimistic. I think the effects look good. I like the ideas presented here, other than the whole Watchmen callback. But yeah, so to me, this is one. I don't have a Disney Plus subscription at the moment. I did 6 months ago. This is one, though, that it's not enough to make me to re-sign up just for this. But it is one of those where this, combined with a couple of extra projects or two, could motivate me to re-sign up for Disney Plus. So, to me, this falls in the good category. And if and when I sign up for Disney Plus again, I plan to watch this. How about you?
It falls into the good category on concept. It falls into the good category for the cast. It falls into the good category for the premise, for the setting, for the time period. It falls into the meh category because it's on Disney Plus, and it's a series. And it falls into the bad category because I feel like Disney, the Star Wars side in particular, their instincts have just been way off. And the fact that they made Obi-Wan into a TV show instead of a movie is where I started to realize their instincts are probably way off. Because I think that should have been a movie and it should not have been a series. So we'll see how this one does. Fool me once, shame on you, and fool me twice, and shame on me. And they fooled me about 8 times now, so I'm pretty foolish. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes with this one. Maybe this is the charm.
Yeah, and I just, I love both of those. I love Star Wars, so I'm eternally optimistic because I think Star Wars is, by its nature, optimistic as a franchise. So I am definitely optimistic that this is going to be a good series. But that's our list. Anyone who's been watching or been watching on the replay, let us know in the comments section below the video what movies and streaming shows you're eager to see in June 2024. Where do you agree with us? Where do you disagree with us? What movies should we have been saying are in the good category? And what movies should we have been saying are in the category? Let us know in the comments section below the video. Before we wrap up, though, Zach Milne, what are your final thoughts on the movies that we were talking about today and the streaming series, The Acolyte? Like, overall, what are your thoughts?
It's not the strongest summer.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, Inside Out 2 looks great. Crap, was that it? No, I mean, A Quiet Place Day 1 looked okay too, and no, I mean, I don't know, man. There's potential for a lot of surprise hits, but we'll see if they actually pan out to be. But I think of what we've talked about, I think the guaranteed winners are probably A Quiet Place Day 1 and Inside Out 2. I think those are like
guaranteed. I tend to agree. I think this is all a result of the writers and actors strike last summer, kind of throwing off the production schedule for summer 2024. And I think that we're going to have a deep summer of films, and I didn't include any indie movies on this list.
There's always surprises that come out of there for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and there are a lot of good-looking indie movies that are scheduled to come out this summer,
and streaming movies.
Streaming movies as well, but there's a lot of them that are probably going to be in theaters that are getting theatrical releases, limited release, small art house kind of thing.
Yeah.
I covered a lot of those in my summer movie preview, because my guest was Patrick from Have Cheetah Will View, and he had, 7 or 8 indie movies, and I had 7 or 8 indie movies, and they were all different. So, on our summer list. So I think this summer is going to be deep. but I don't think it's going to be very top heavy in terms of, Terminator 2 or Jurassic World, or there's like you're saying, there's a reason why we included a Star Wars streaming show on this, because there's not a ton of sexy with the big blockbusters for this summer. There's nothing that makes you go, oh, I have to watch. I don't know why that got a little dirty all of a sudden, but there's nothing. There's not, other than Deadpool, which comes out in July.
Yeah.
There's nothing really about the big blockbusters for this summer that makes me go, I have to go see this movie. I can't wait for the 2 or 3 months between the first trailer and when it comes out in theaters. So I do think that there is a lot of good quality films that look like they're going to come out this year. There's nothing to me that looks like it's like, oh, it's Transformers 8. Yay! There's nothing along those lines, I think, but I do think that the films that are coming out in June, even though it's the peak of summer movie season, it's after the beginning in terms of it's not May, but it's before the peak. It's not July, which is sort of the end of the peak, so it's right in the center of the bullseye. And I'm kind of, there's just not there's good movies there, I think, that I'm really excited to go see, but it's not the usual huge number of them that you're sitting there going, like, how am I gonna see all these films? There isn't that factor to this summer of summer 2024 that is usually there.
Yeah,
in summertime.
I completely agree.
So that's our reaction. So what did you think of this new format? Anyone watching? Do you like the good, the bad, and the meh? Let me know in the comments section below this video. Also, and Zach, what did you think of the format? Is this a format that you like?
Yeah, it was fun. I liked it a lot.
Sweet.
I got the live show on my phone here too. I've been looking in. It looks great.
Sweet. Thank you. I appreciate it. And so with that, we'll say for anyone still watching or watching on replay, be sure to click somewhere over here. I've got another suggested video coming up, and please be sure to like and subscribe and comment, and subscribe to my channel, subscribe to Zach's channel, and we will see you guys next time. See you, everybody.